Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth McCravey, a website designer and business coach for entrepreneurs and your host for the Breakthrough Brand podcast, the show that's all about pulling back the curtain on how to actually build a successful business. I don't skim the surface around here. If you want a deep dive into the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to run a successful business and stand out in a crowd, you're in the right place. After creating a multiple six-figure-a-year website design business in my 20s, I'm ready to share everything I've learned and everything I'm still learning because I believe the keys to building a thriving business should never be a secret. Here you'll find episodes that are actionable, direct, and fun, like friends chatting business over coffee, and a fresh, honest take on the reality of being an entrepreneur. If you're ready to master online marketing, branding, website design, mindset, and business strategy, then this is the podcast for you. It's time to build your breakthrough brand. Let's do this. Welcome back to the Breakthrough Brand podcast, guys. It is interview time, and I am thrilled to bring you this exciting conversation with Angela Brown of Angela Brown Photography. She's a talented brand and portrait photographer based in Brighton, Michigan, and her business story is really cool. So she was a wealth advisor for 25-ish years before doing a complete 180 on her career to becoming a photographer, proving that it's never quote unquote too late to make a major career shift and completely just do something else in your work. So we talk about her career story, business tips for building a photography career. Photographers listening, you will love this, but also I want to say, if you're not a photographer, please don't turn this episode off because there are so many ways to apply what she's saying to other types of businesses as well. I definitely got some insights from what she shared as a non-photographer. And we also talk about her experience with her M-Shop website template, how she moved from Show It to WordPress after using Pro Photo for nearly 10 years. Why she chose M-Shop, how she picked her template, and all of that kind of stuff. And if you didn't know, M-Shop is the name of my Show It website template shops. That's what I'm referring to when I say that. Anyway, though, Angela has been a longtime listener of this podcast, which I am always just so honored to have you guys from the community who are already podcast listeners on the show. It's always such a fun conversation. I feel like you guys bring the content people need to hear because you know what people need to hear because you're a podcast listener. So this is a fellow podcast listener you're going to be hearing from, and also an incredibly talented businesswoman and photographer. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Angela Brown. All right. Hello, friends. I'm thrilled to welcome Angie Brown to the podcast. Angie is an incredible brand photographer. She has a really inspiring story of building her photography business that I've enjoyed watching you as I've gotten to know your business, but also even prepping for this interview, reading over some of the notes you've sent. She's also an M-Shop customer and she's a part of Breakthrough Brand All Access. And so we've known each other online for a while now, and I feel like I see your face all the time. So it's fun to be here connecting on Zoom. So welcome.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm so happy to be here. I'm excited to chat.
Yes. And you're a podcast listener too. So it's you're on a podcast you listen to.
I feel like one of the OGs, I feel like for a long time.
I love that. Yeah. So tell everyone listening a bit about what you do in your business, who you help, where you live, even all of that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, I am located in Brighton, Michigan, which is about an hour west of Detroit, west and north of Detroit. And I've been a professional photographer for about 12 or 13 years, but I currently have narrowed down to specifically personal brand photography, headshots, and a handful of high school seniors.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Let's get into, and again, we were just talking about this before we started recording. That's something that's so funny about podcasts. I feel like I'm wait, they weren't hearing all that. But yeah, so you changed your career to photography after you had done a wealth advising career. Correct. Prior to that for quite a while. Let's talk about that. Just tell what you were doing before, and then kind of how you ended up deciding hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to do a later career shift.
Okay. Yeah. So I, right out of college, I started with a regional bank called Comerica Bank, and had over the years, I moved into our wealth management area, basically selling investment management services and trust services for high net worth individuals. So I really loved what I did. And I love the kinds of clients that I worked with, high net worth people that had money decisions to make. So because I was in sales, I used to have older wealth advisors tell me, someday you're going to be burned out, Angie. And I thought, no, I really like it. But every year, the way our business was, every year I started at zero and had to try to make my goal. So every year it got a little bit harder and harder. So I did kind of hit a little burnout over the years after doing it for probably 20 some years.
Yeah. Gosh. And do you feel like you still use like those skills from when you were doing that in your life now?
Absolutely. That's a good question. I think, especially with photographers and other service-based businesses, when you don't have it, like if you're not selling a widget, you're selling your services, it's hard to, in your mind, make sure that you know that you're worth it. Or maybe you're intimidated by the types of clients that will pay what you're worth. And working with high net worth clients, it was really easy to transition for me. I never felt like I was intimidated by a client that maybe wanted to hire me to do family portraits or something. And I was not afraid of it just because I was so used to working with people that are, had 10, 50, $100 million net worths because they're just like us.
Yeah.
So that just gave me the confidence to start working with anybody in my photography business.
Yeah. And that's a big thing of, feeling the confidence to, charge what you need to charge, all of that. Yeah. So when you decided to stop doing that job and start photography, like how was photography the thing that made sense?
It was a surprise to me too. It's a good question. I got a new fancy camera back in like 2007, 2008, when my daughter, I have an only child who's 21 now. So she was probably about 6 or 7. And one of my coworkers who was in the same job as me, he got a brand new Nikon and I got a brand new Canon. And he called me one day and he said, hey, I'm going to start taking these classes about 30 miles east of here at night. And I fell in love with photography. I just didn't know anything. I always would buy the camera and I wouldn't know how to use it except for on auto. And I was just smitten immediately. So the classes were supposed to end at 10. Sometimes the instructor went until 11 or 11:30 at night. And I was just like, oh, please don't have it be over. It just is so, and I started dreaming about it and photographing everything under the sun all day, all the time. And then I just decided a few years later that I wanted to go into the portrait business as a side hustle to what I was doing at the bank.
Okay. So how was that hours wise for your life as a mom and a wife and like having the corporate job and photography at the same time?
That's a good question. And that's the question of the hour. I was really lucky at the bank because when my daughter was born, I was able to make an agreement with my boss to have me go, quote, less than full time, which was pretty significant because back in 20 some years ago, officers of the bank didn't go part-time, So I was lucky to have the flexibility to do that. However, I kind of filled that time with my photography business. So over the years, like during the last, 5 years or so of doing both, I was thinking all the time about photography. Even when my daughter and I were like sitting down at the counter, eating or doing homework, I'm already thinking about what my next shoot's going to be or planning for my shoot, preparing for my shoot. So I found myself every weekend doing photo shoots or ordering appointments with clients. And every night I was up editing until midnight or later while my daughter was sitting in the other room watching TV sometimes. That was really, really hard to juggle.
Yeah. So that
guilt is real.
I know that does sound like, I know we were talking before, like I was telling Angie about how I'm like, Colin is struggling right now, adjusting to preschool and finding help, childcare help and all that stuff. Like, yeah, you've experienced all of that. How was it when you decided to actually go like, okay, I'm going to be like, photography is the only thing now. So you're doing both at the same time. What was that decision like?
That was a decision that my husband and I kind of made together. And by that time we were in our early 50s because I had been with the bank. Let's see. Well, by the time I left, I was about 29 years. And I started a few years before that saying, I just don't know how much longer I can do it. It burns me out. I love it, but I'm just stretched too thin. I'm still dreaming about photography all the time. And then my daughter was getting ready to go into middle school. And I remember one night at the kitchen table, I think she was at the end of 7th grade, and my husband and I were talking about it. And he said, yeah, he goes, I agree. I think it's time, because he knew how stretched I was. He knew I was up until 2 a.m. editing when I, should have been getting my sleep and giving more of myself to Lauren. So I kind of had the long goodbye at work. I announced that I was leaving, March of 2014. And then September is when I finally left. So I kind of had that 6-month goodbye, which was nice because I'd been with the bank for a long time, but it also really gave me a chance to explain to a lot of people why I was leaving, because I knew that some of these people could potentially be my clients.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. And with that, so I know we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, but you were saying how this might be different, your situation, than how some people are when they are starting a business, transition careers, because this was a later in your career transition. You were not I got to make the same amount as I was as a wealth investor, and this is going to be this exact replacement. Can you talk some about that, and any advice you'd have for someone who is more in your situation of hey, I've been doing this career a long time, and I'm ready to do something I feel more passionate about now later?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different reasons why people will leave. And it's not always because they feel they need to replace their income. In my case, I didn't need to replace my income, but I knew a few years before I was going to leave the bank that this was probably in the cards. I had an only child. I didn't want to realize that she was in college and then me decide I want to retire from corporate life. So I made the decision to do that. And so people have to make their own decision at what point in time do you want to do that. I really felt like the last couple of years of working at the bank, I tried to spend less money. I tried to save a little bit more than I did maybe before, just knowing that the writing was on the wall. And I do think in my case, it was helpful that I had kind of that long goodbye, because it gave me an opportunity to kind of mentally get out of corporate, the corporate mentality. Yeah. Because I admit, after I left my first day, after the day that I left the bank, I was feeling what in the world did I do? So I think preparing for life afterwards can take on a lot of different meanings. But for me, it was just adjusting to having the life that I want, knowing I didn't necessarily need to replace my income, but making sure that my professionalism from my previous job carried over into my now primary job.
Yeah, which I can totally see that in your business. And with that, so have you ever done wedding photography, or did you go straight into portrait?
I will never do wedding photography.
I feel as a non-photographer looking at the photography industry, I feel like most photographers start with weddings, but weddings are very scary to me when I think about that. How did you not do weddings first? I guess that makes sense.
That is so true, because a lot of people will assume, oh, do you do weddings? I'm thinking, no. I always had that nightmare that if I did a wedding, bride and groom would kiss and it'd be the wrong exposure. Yeah. And I'd be wait, excuse me, yelling down from the top, can you kiss again? I just never really had an interest in it. I had an interest in doing families, kids, and newborns at the beginning. That's kind of what I thought I wanted to do.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, that's
but
great.
I know a lot of young, especially younger people, photographers, that maybe they don't have kids, and photographing weddings is a really good way to feel like you can photograph in any environment. So I give wedding photographers so much credit. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. And I feel like wedding photography too is one where you often see a lot of burnout, especially once people start growing a family, because then you're wait, every weekend it's a lot to keep up with. Whereas brand photography or other types of portrait is more flexible and less all at once.
No, that's absolutely.
Yeah. Yes. So let's talk about finding clients as a photographer. What are some tips you'd give for finding clients, and how did you find clients early on?
I think the first thing that I did was I told everybody that I worked with, because it was okay in my company to have and I was also a certified financial planner, and I also had a brokerage license, and there were some hurdles that I needed to cross in order to have this kind of side job. But once I took care of that, I just let everybody know that I was interested in this and that I was doing it. not necessarily clients, but certainly other people at the bank. So I would say my first clients were people that I knew, like from work, friends. And I always was worried that if I told too many people that I was going into business, that they would feel obligated to hire me. So I had to kind of get through that mindset. But people just want to know, right? And they may not be interested, or I may not be the right photographer for them because of the type of photography they want, but they may have a friend that wants to do it. So the word of mouth was really the first thing. And building a website, and I know we're going to talk probably about websites, but having a website right out of the chute was really important for me to help attract people that I didn't know.
Yeah, those are great advice there. And that's a good mindset thing, like you said, of like you can feel, I remember feeling that way too, because for me, a big way I got clients early on, and I also still get clients and customers, is through people you know in real life. And it can feel so intimidating to be like telling someone that, and you're like, wait, but like, I'm not saying you have to like work with me, but like just in general, like this is making that connection point. You're right. People want to know. And I think it's a good reminder to people that like, we might feel like by telling someone that we're like obligating them to pick us for whenever they need the thing, but they probably don't actually feel that way. Like we have a bigger story because it's a bigger deal to us than it is to them, basically what we're telling them.
That is true. I will say though, I'm not sure how it is with web designers and graphic designers, but for photographers, there are a lot of different business models. So it was awkward. And I'm sure photographers listening to this will agree. It's awkward when people that you know come and say, oh, I'd like to have a portrait session with you. And you haven't done a very good job of explaining how your model is different than other people's models. For example, I was never an all-inclusive photographer where I would photograph, do a session and charge a certain fee and then just hand them the digital files. I was always the photographer who did the session, had an ordering appointment where they got to see the images, all their beautiful images, and then decide what kind of products they wanted. And they wouldn't get the digital files. They would get the wall portraits or the albums. So that I needed pretty quickly to make sure my messaging and my website explained that I am a product-based photographer and a high-end product-based photographer. If someone was looking to just do a session for a couple $100 where they get the files, I wanted them to know that I wasn't the right person for them. So pretty early on, I needed to make sure that all my visuals were right. My collateral was telling the story about what I wanted to offer. So I wouldn't have friends come to me and say, oh, wait, you mean I don't get the digital files?
Yeah, that is an important communication difference. Let's talk about that too, of like with a website early on. So a lot of people, photographers, other service providers, we can wait on the website thing a really long time, which I always am like, no judgment if that's what someone does, but it can be really helpful, like you said, to have a website quickly, to find those people that are not the word of mouth people, you know, in real life, but other people through things like Google, or just having like a presence to send someone to it from a networking event. But what was your website experience like before? I know your website was working for you from the beginning because you've been building a successful business this whole time, but let's talk about your website basically before you switched to show it in an MShop template.
Okay. I would also suggest that anybody that's in the photography business or a service-based business that thinks they can do it just through social media, I really think having a website presence will immediately increase the perception that people have of you.
Yeah.
So I, from the beginning, had a WordPress site. I wanted to do it right. And I hired a graphic designer who used a platform. ProPhoto was what the name of the platform was. And it was used on the WordPress site. So I hired a graphic designer who created a logo and color palette and font palette. And I knew I wanted to blog from the beginning. So that's another reason why we used WordPress. And it was fine. I felt like it helped me a lot. So if I had friends that would say to me, hey, I'd really like to have you photograph my family, I could immediately send them to my website, just say, hey, just check around. And they would kind of know based on the pricing that I may have talked about in my website, they could decide if it was within their price range or not. Yeah. What I found is, and you probably hear this a lot, I felt like I it would take me forever to try to figure out how to make changes on my website. And I didn't really want to have to go back to my designer and say, hey, can I just change out this image, or can I change this or add this page? It was just so hard. So I really felt like instead of living with a living, breathing website, I was had a living, breathing to-do list of things that I needed to do to my website.
Yeah.
So I did that. I had 2 or 3 revisions over the years with my WordPress site. And then at some point in time, I started listening. I don't even know how I found your podcast, but I started listening to you. And I think it was about 2 years ago where I thought, oh, I know what, my website, Pro Photo Blogs, in order to become responsive, I had to basically tear it down and redo it. And I reached out to my designer and she said, oh, Angie, I think you can do it yourself. You're pretty good at this. I cried myself to sleep every night. So I thought, I can't do it. And so I started checking out Show It because of you and also your templates. And then I made the change about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Show It. And I love it. What I loved about Show It versus a lot of the other choices that I had is that you can use your WordPress for blogging. So I didn't have to start my blog from scratch. I could just transfer over my existing blog posts and it was great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of what you just said is so relatable for people listening, but like you said, you felt like you had a living, breathing to-do list, not a living, breathing list. Yeah. And that's like, I do hear that a lot. And I know actually I used to design on WordPress before Show It.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah. And I think WordPress is awesome. And like, that's why actually, when I did discover Show It, I was like, oh, wow, this is nice that it's like, still has that blog side on WordPress, which is so robust, so much you can do with all the plugins. But then the designing is so much simpler and easier to change. And I had clients who was like, hard. They wanted to change stuff, but always need to come back to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this would be great, like retainer work if that's what I'm trying to do. But I'd rather y'all be able to like finish this up, like the project finish up, generally speaking, unless there's like big new needs, like a big sales page design or something like that. So yes, I think the WordPress side of things, is really nice for people to be able to utilize. And I had that same experience of like, I was able to move over my WordPress blog post and it was pretty seamless, generally speaking. So let's talk about the customizing process. So you have the Jenna template and you changed up a lot. Like, I really love what you've done with that. Whenever I first saw your site, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Cause it really does look a lot different from the template. Also, someone might see the Jenna template and be like, it's modeled kind of for like a life or business coach. So not necessarily modeled for a photographer. When I say modeled, I literally just mean that like the filler images and the filler copy is really not necessarily saying it's for photographers, but you may look awesome as a photographer and a lot different. So like, what was the customization experience like? Like anything you can kind of share about that? Interrupting this episode with a suggestion for the small business owners listening. Ever wonder what you should do for healthcare when you and your spouse are both self-employed, so there's no work-provided health insurance to participate in? Well, when my husband Adam joined me in the entrepreneurial job space over 4 years ago, we joined Christian Healthcare Ministries instead of getting traditional health insurance. And it was the best decision for us, especially in these years of growing and raising a family while also running multiple businesses. CHM is a health cost-sharing ministry and is a faith-based alternative to health insurance. We did tons of research before choosing CHM, and if you know me and Adam, you know we are all about doing the math when making big or small financial decisions. And even though it's not insurance, CHM shares 100% of eligible medical bills, which is more than the typical 70 or 80% of medical bills paid for by insurance companies. All sharing is determined by the CHM guidelines, which you can check out before and after joining. And for the mamas and mamas to be listening, you truly cannot find a better healthcare option for maternity care. I had a vaginal delivery and a C-section and birth center care and hospital care between my 2 pregnancies and births, and it was all 100% shared for. And outside of birth, we've had our share of emergency room visits and procedures as a family, and those costs were all shared by members at Christian Healthcare Ministries, leaving us only paying our monthly contribution. CHM is less expensive month to month than insurance, and because there's no network, you can choose your care with whichever providers best fit your family. I seriously just cannot recommend Christian Healthcare Ministries enough. You've got to check them out. Go to elizabethmccravy.com/CHM for more information. Also putting that link in the show notes, elizabethmccravy.com/CHM. Now back to the episode.
I had so much fun doing it. I always think in another life, I wish I had the skills to be a designer like you, because I just love, I'm a visual person, right? I'm a photographer. So, and I know what I like and what I don't. So I got the Jenna template. I looked at all your templates, and I was also looking at the Reese template, but I like the Jenna because I felt like the layout was kind of a good start for me. But I think I probably took about 3 weeks to do my website from start to finish. But I tell you what, your course that comes along with the template is incredible. It is so amazing. In fact, I still refer back to it sometimes. In fact, I was just looking at it a couple of weeks ago because I wanted to make some changes to my about page. And I went back, and I think you have a little section on copywriting for your about page. Yeah. And so I just love that course. So it was really, I just sat there and I did the course. I got messy, like you suggest, and tried to play with the different, what's the name of
like set canvases or
canvases? Yeah. Yes, not cells. Canvases, and moving them around. And I just had a great time doing it. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, but it reflects me perfectly.
Yeah. And that's all. I feel like you explained it all really well. And 3 weeks is like, probably sounds really dreamy to a lot of people to be able to get their website up, but like that is totally doable. Quicker than that's doable. Longer than that also can be what makes sense, right, depending on like,
which is fine.
Yeah. Depending on like what you're doing. And a cool thing too, for anyone listening, like when you think about switching from whatever you're on, with the way Show It works, you can actually work on your website while your other site's still live. So you don't have to do the coming soon page thing if you don't want to, which is really nice. So your business you can still be blogging or podcasting or whatever it is, while you have this stuff you're working on. And I'm glad you still referenced the Show It Blueprint course.
I tell you what, if anyone's thinking about getting one of your templates, that course is worth its weight in gold. It's great. And it helped me with SEO and doing, how to do all the SEO stuff. It's not just about how to move a canvas or how to copy a page. It's very encompassing.
Thank you. Yeah. And I love that course too. And I love it hearing people say that. And it's funny too, for me, because that was like the third iteration of the course, like what it is right now. But that was the first course I ever did. And I love course stuff now and like and that was before I had my podcast. So I feel like the writing was like on the wall, so to speak, of like me making that and being like, oh yeah, I really like this part of all the things of like teaching how to do something. So yeah, that's really fun. And let's tell people, like, I guess, you said setting up your site was really fun. What were some changes you made and some changes you didn't make from what the template was, just to kind of like I said, everyone listening, go check out your website. It's AngelaBrownPhotography.com. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So spelled like it sounds, Angela Brown Photography, and we'll link to it as well, but people can go and like look and see the different changes you made. But let's kind of talk about that. So like one thing I'll go ahead and say a change you made, it has a very like blue color palette, which is different than the original template. Didn't even have blue in the color. It was
like
palette.
The peachy, I think it was like a peach type.
Yeah. Like some pinks and like purple vibes and a gold. But yeah, yes. So let's talk about that. Like, how did you make that decision to change colors? Like, did you get branding done prior, all that?
Okay. Yeah. So I had my color palette done and it's been consistent. I'm not one who believes in rebranding all the time. I've kept pretty much the same color palette for 13 years. So I've used that, the teal, more of a turquoise and other iterations of that. And my last name is Brown. So brown's always going to be one of my colors.
Yeah.
But what I think what I did when I was fleshing out the brand colors in on the Show It platform is I picked another, I added a couple of other blues that go along with my main color, like a lighter color blue and also a little bit lighter color brown. So what I liked about the Show It platform is that I think I could add up to 8 colors.
Yeah.
So one of them is white. So I had that set up pretty much consistently. So I knew that I needed to replace all of the other colors that you had in there, but that just pretty much gets done automatically when you set your palette.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really cool thing is how like you change out the colors and then it changes throughout the entire site anywhere.
So easy.
Yeah. You just got to match, which I share how to do this in the Show It Blueprint course, but like, when you're changing out, like, let's say you're changing the navy in the template to a black, like you want to match those up versus changing like the white to the black because it's going to look crazy. Like you got to match with like the alignment. But yeah, and I want to point out too, for people who go look at your website, you do a really great job as a photographer of actually having yourself on the website, not just images of your work. Can you talk about that for a minute? If you have any thoughts on like doing that, like I'm looking right now at your, like the hero section, so like the top of your website, and it's you and a client where you're like showing them their photos. It's like, oh yeah, like we can see you immediately. We're not like, oh, who is the photographer? Who's the client,
Well, I always say photography is a personality-based business. People don't hire you because you do pretty pictures. They want to know the person behind the camera. They want to know, I mean, yes, you want them to like your work, but they also need to know who you are. I get very frustrated with a lot of my photographer friends who don't even like to have one image of them on their website. And that's really, I mean, that's just the wrong way to think about it. So I kind of knew early on I wanted to build my personal brand and be the face of my brand. My name is on the brand, so it only makes sense. It's not fun looking at yourself and having photos done of yourself very often, but I do get branding sessions done for myself, even though I can do them, just because I like having branding images done and I just want to show them on the site. Because I think the image that you're talking about, Elizabeth, is the one where am I showing someone the back of my camera on the front? Yeah. So I want my entrepreneur client to envision herself being there with me, looking at the back of my camera, being excited.
Yes, what you're saying, it's like, it's about the personal brand. People aren't hiring you just because of a pretty picture. They want to feel comfortable with you and they want to know who is photographing them, which is a lot different than some things we can sell where it is more of like money for the thing. And that's kind of like it, but the photography is the thing. And I would say designers listening as well. And a lot of other service businesses, that's true for you as well. And I love your like statement on the like homepage. I help entrepreneurs upscale their brands with intentional eye-catching images. And then underneath it, you have your location and that you are a personal branding and portrait photographer. So you like nailed that whole section on the site, both from like an SEO perspective, clarity, and you're not using like random words that just are like kind of jargony. Do you have any advice for like writing that? I don't know. That's like a random question. I'd not prepare you for it all, but like as a reader, like that's a good statement though.
Well, I will say, no matter what kind of business you're in, if you're in any kind of personality-based business, even if you're virtual, even if you're a web designer and you don't have to be in the same town, I always recommend putting your location above the fold on your website. And if you're a photographer, if you don't have where you're located, people are just going to go away. They're going to go somewhere else. So like in my case, Angela Brown is a really common name. And there are other Angela Browns that are photographers. So I want to say Brighton, Michigan based personal branding and portrait photographer. And I also have it in my footer. But I help entrepreneurs upskill their brands. I went through an exercise where I wrote out probably 15 or 20 phrases or sentences that I wanted to consider. And that's the one that I felt really helped my client see quickly what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is like, really well done and really clear. And that is great advice of putting your location. I agree that like everyone needs it somewhere. But yeah, if you are someone who, whether it's that you're a photographer or like you're an event venue or another type of service provider that is like super location based, it's really important for SEO and for clarity to be front and center there. And you have it in like your SEO title too, which is really good.
Right.
Your location.
And did you notice, even though I had my font family done, I still use that. I forget what that font is called.
Yeah, I can't remember.
On the front, Gascon, I think, that you had in the template. And I said, I really like that. So I kept that as one of the font families that I used.
Yeah, and it integrates really seamlessly. Yeah. And that's something too, guys, like with the templates, they all come set with typically anywhere from like 2 to 5 fonts being used, usually closer to like maybe 3 or 4. And you can change them out really easily, and just like colors, it changes throughout the whole site. But Angie, I know we're like, what do I call you? Angela is her professional name. Angie is her nickname. But on her website, you have it where it's like some of the fonts you've been previously using plus one of the fonts from the Jonah template as it was. So it's like you can integrate them both. And it integrates really beautifully. Like the different fonts all look really nice together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love your designs when you purchase a template. I mean, you could basically use the same color palette, the same fonts if you wanted to. If you're just building a brand and you're purchasing one of your templates, they're beautiful just right out of the box.
Thank you. Yeah. And it is nice that you don't have to change as much if you don't feel like you want to. Hey friends, this episode interruption will be really quick, I promise. I hope you're enjoying this conversation with the amazing Angela. I just wanted to tell you, if you're thinking about getting a new up-leveled website, whether you're already using Showit or you're on ProPhoto like Angela was or anything else, I just want to encourage you to check out my website template shop titled M Shop. That's the name of it, after my name, EM Shop. I have a very curated collection of awesome strategic website templates. They work with Showit, and these templates are great for photographers like Angela or other business types like coaches, consultants, bloggers, designers, bookkeepers and accountants, social media managers, wellness pros, wedding industry professionals, and so many more. I mean, these templates are used by a wide range of industries. And if you're listening to this live, then I have a little secret spoiler for you. That was me trying to whisper. Black Friday is just around the corner, which is literally the absolute best time of year to shop my website templates. I do the biggest sale all year long on Black Friday with tons of other awesome bonuses as well. So you can take the quiz though to get matched with a website template prior to Black Friday. So you kind of already know what you're shopping for, and find out what's a good fit for your business at elizabethmccravey.com/quiz. So it's like a 2-minute quiz. You answer some questions, you get matched with a template, you get put on my email list so you can learn more when Black Friday arrives. And then mark your calendar for the week of November 21st. That's when the big sale will kick off, and you can shop M Shop templates at a discount, and get some other cool bonuses as well. So that's it. That's all I have for you. Now back to the conversation with Angela. What would you say is your favorite part of your website?
I like my about page. I have to go back and look real quick.
Yeah.
I love what you integrated into the templates about showing your personality. Like on my about page, I show my favorite things, and I love the way that it flies off from the side. And I like to update that every once in a while as well. Just different things I like, because I want the people that come to my website to know more about me. So I just think the about page is a lot of fun.
Yeah, yours is really fun. Yours is like not too busy, not too long, but just has like the right amount of like quick information
Thanks.
About you. Yeah, it's awesome. Okay, I have it. Let me see. I feel like I have a lot more things I want to ask you, but one kind of thought when it comes to like building a photography business, like you've had your business, I think you said 13 years now, or 12 going on 13, which is a long time. Like a lot of photographers get burnt out before they hit that amount of time, or they can't financially make it work. So many different things. Like, what would you say is something that has helped you like do it for the long haul that you could like pass on to maybe a newer photographer or another type of service provider listening?
Oh, yeah. Well, early on, I know I said that I was obsessed with photography for a long time, but when I started, I wanted to photograph babies and newborn, and then kids. And over the years, I learned pretty quickly that if I wanted to be profitable and not be spending so much time running myself ragged, I needed to photograph what I wanted to photograph and make it work for me. For example, it probably only took 10 newborns to realize I'm not the newborn baby whisperer. And I really didn't love doing them. And I also from a business point of view, I had a hard time working with parents of newborns because they didn't necessarily want to take the time to come into the studio and look at the images. And so over the years, I just decided to let go of different aspects of my photography. I stopped photographing newborns. I stopped photographing kids. Even a year ago, I photographed my last family. I love photographing families, and I love working with framing and beautiful wall galleries in their homes, but I didn't love the evening appointments and so on. So I really just dug deep and decided I don't want to be burned out with families. So I just decided I love doing seniors because it's really only a few months of the year. Like right now, I'm in the middle of it. And I love working with entrepreneurs, and they work well with my business. Entrepreneurs, my branding sessions are during the day. It helps me. And I still think like a corporate person because I worked, 8 to 5 for years. So I like working during the day and I don't get burned out from it. The other thing is, and this talks about pricing. If you start getting burned out, it's probably because you're not finding that you're getting paid what you think you should be getting paid. So having your branding in place, having your website look good will also allow you to increase your pricing so you feel more comfortable with what you're doing. And also, it's probably better, at least it was for me, to photograph fewer people and making more money than photographing zillions of people and being busy all the time to try to make up that same amount of money.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah. So photographing what you like and niching down too, I feel like is also in that of like how when you start saying like, hey, this is what I do, this is what I'm really good at versus like, I'll kind of do all the different types of photography.
And also the whole lifestyle. How does it fit into your lifestyle? Because I didn't want to be out photographing families every night.
Yeah.
I wanted to be home with my family. So I really thought about how I wanted to work my business as a business and work with my life.
Yeah. And what do you feel like that looks like for you now? Like, what's your schedule like working wise? And what are other things that you're like doing that you enjoy? Now that you do have like the entrepreneurial freedom that you didn't have for so long in your career.
And I had such an unusual year this year, which really showed that I've kind of built the business the way I wanted to. I had the opportunity to go to Europe, not once, but twice with my daughter because she was studying over there this summer. And then we also had an illness in our family, which took me away from Michigan a lot this summer. So having a business that doesn't rely on 5 sessions a week or 3 sessions a week, or just something that's outrageous for the amount of time I put into each session really helped. So, and I'm pretty good about setting boundaries with people in a good way. I want them to know that I'm servicing the heck out of them, and I provide a lot of great service, but I don't need to do so many sessions a week or a month that it doesn't allow me to go on vacation or just play my golf league on Thursday mornings.
Oh, that's fun. I love that. Yeah, that's awesome. That's great advice. Yeah, I love seeing like what business ownership can look like throughout the years of just like, and when you do have like an adult child and how that is a lot different than like the phase I'm in, it's cool like seeing that.
For sure. And you talk a lot about in some of your podcasts about working smarter and not harder. And especially since you became a mom, just figuring out what's important. And that's what everybody needs to do, because you can let your business just expand into your whole life and permeate through everything. And you just really have to set the limits that you want to set, that you need to set, so you don't get burned out.
Yeah. Yes. So true. And really how, like, I feel like that is such a clear thing of like how you've been able to do it this long is being able to like set those kind of boundaries. Love it. Okay. I feel like I can ask you a million other questions, but I want to move into rapid fire questions, which I have some that you were not prepared for, which is what
Oh,
everyone loves,
good.
right? I know
Okay. We'll see how rapid I can be.
I know. I just thought of two more as we were talking. So we've got more. But okay, first, your favorite business book that you would recommend we read.
Okay. I have one that probably has not been talked about on
Yeah.
your podcast, but it's called Worth Every Penny. And it is written by Sarah Petty, who is a portrait photographer, and Aaron Verbeck.
Okay.
It is a
Awesome.
book that is not just for photographers. She's a photographer. Sarah is. In fact, she educates new photographers on charging what they're worth. But this book was a game changer to me. I've given it to half a dozen other entrepreneurs, like my sister, who's has a landscape business. It just talks about how to run a boutique business and add all the different touch points that your clients will adore, which will also allow you to charge more money instead of undercharging what you are really worth. So it's probably a 10-year-old book, but it's still really, really good.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll link to that. That's cool too.
Yeah,
That's actually written by a photographer.
Yeah, wortheverypennybook.com is the name of the website.
Cool. Love it. Okay. What is an unpopular opinion about photography in general, or even like the industry that you could share?
I think some photographers think they need to do whatever a client wants. Like maybe you're a newborn photographer, but somebody wants you to photograph their family, but you really don't want to photograph the families. I think you have the power to be able to say that that's not your specialty, but I do know another family photographer that would be fantastic for you. So I think some people feel like they have to do any kind of photography they're asked to do, and it's okay to say, I don't do that. Weddings is a good example, or photographing a dentist's office. Somebody may not feel comfortable with that, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, you don't have to do all the things. Love that. Okay, before we start recording, we talked about how you use the 1 second a day app. And you've used it, you said, for like 5 years. And she was telling me like she did put me on her 1 second a day as a video. And I feel like I'm someone who I got that app and then never really use it. So tell us, I feel like my question would have been like, what's an app you use all the time? But that I feel like is your answer. So tell us about that app. Because I do think that's such a cool thing, a way to capture memories and all that.
It is. It is called 1 Second Every Day. And I used the free version for like 4 years, but you basically just do a horizontal video of something in your life every day. And now you can do 2 seconds. You can do 2 different clips a day. And at the end of the year, it will just string them all into like a 6-second video. And so it's really fun. And then you can download it onto your computer or whatever. So I've been doing it. And if you forget a day, it just skips right over that day.
Yeah.
But part of you looks at it and you think, oh, I live such a boring life. But then other times you think, oh, that's right, I did go visit so-and-so that day. So
Yeah.
it's a fun video. I mean, all my friends, all my family, all I have to do is say, oh, you're going to be my 1 second, and they all know what it's going to be.
That's so fun. Yeah. And yes, I was saying before we started recording of how I got that app, and when Colin was born, I was like, I'm going to use this every day. And it's now like on my phone still, but like not even downloaded because I haven't used it. So I'm inspired. I'm going to start using it.
Yeah. Especially with a baby, for sure.
Yeah. It'd be cool. Yeah. Seeing like a whole year. That's a really cool idea. Okay. Let's talk about, to close out, where people can find you, connect with you. Let's talk about your upcoming course, which, guys, if you've been listening, you're like, oh my gosh, I would love to learn from her because I'm a photographer and like she's doing this thing. She does have some stuff coming for you. So let's talk about that.
So my website, I know will be in the show notes, but angelabrownphotography.com. I am creating a course specifically for photographers to help them build their personal brands and be able to attract their ideal clients. I could talk for hours on that, and I'm really excited to finish that up. Hopefully by the end of the year. I think January and February would be a great time to relook at somebody's brand. So I have a challenge, a website challenge that you can find under angelabrownphotography.com/challenge. Okay. And that'll be a 5-day challenge that they're kind of low-lying fruit and things that you can do on your website to make it more attractive for your clients that you want to attract.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah, we'll link to that. And I'm excited for you with your course. And once it is out, we can put a link to that as well. But yeah, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story. It's been awesome.
I've had a lot of fun. So thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode all the way until the end. I appreciate you being here. And if you enjoyed this episode, then I want to invite you to check out my website template shop too. Over on elizabethmccravey.com, you'll find show it website templates that are easy to use, strategically designed, and created to help you book more clients and customers. Maybe your current website is really boring. Maybe it's a challenge to update, and maybe even it's that thing that you really feel like is just completely holding your business back. Your website needs to be strategically and intentionally designed in order for it to convert your viewers into raving customers, and that's exactly what my M-Shop templates do. So these are pre-made show it website templates where you can plug and play your content into it with ease and then get started with a website that's designed to actually help you make more money. These templates are designed to be SEO friendly on the back end, and they're not just pretty, but they are very strategic and with all the strategies I teach on this podcast. And best of all, they're easy for you to set up all by yourself. So shop them at elizabethmccravey.com/shop and come join the M-Shop family of hundreds of happy customers. And as an added perk, you can use the code BBPodcast at checkout to get 10% off any template as a thank you for being a part of the podcast family. So that's BB Podcast for 10% off any template over at elizabethmccravey.com. And if you love this podcast, don't forget that you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts so that you never miss an episode, and leave a rating and review for the show wherever you're listening. Share it with a friend, share it on Instagram or Facebook. That's a great way to support the podcast and get the word out. All right, I'll be back next week with another new episode.